Dr. Nay, welcome to Locked In. Shout out to Kevin Lanning for making this happen today.
Yes, I'm so happy to be here. This just worked out perfectly.
Yeah, no one ever comes to Connecticut like randomly, so it was cool that and it happened. Like the timing worked out because we were talking last week, and you're like, "I'll be there next week."
Yeah, that's just the way it's meant to be.
Now, I want to plug in your book and your social media right at the top of this episode if you want to tell the audience about the book that you have written and what you do now.
Yeah, sure. So I got a book published January 9th of this year called Run Like Hell, A Therapist's Guide to Recognizing, Escaping, and Healing from Trauma Bonds. Here it is. And it was a very, very humbling experience to write a book. But I wrote this book because I'm a therapist, and what was happening was that all these smart, kind, beautiful women were coming into my office in trauma bonds. And I was like, what the hell is happening? We got to go back to the research. And so I went back to the research and I wrote this book to take away the stigma from the victim in a trauma bond, because we're always asking, why does she stay? Instead of why does he do that? So I just wrote the book to really educate and empower them and validate them. And so far, it's going great.
That's awesome. We'll have the link to that book in the description.
Yeah, and then you can find me on Instagram at The Real Dr. Nadine, TikTok, which I think is the Wild West of social media, Dr. Nay, Naelmft, and of course my website, drnay.com. I have tons of free resources, assessments, trauma bond assessment, pathological lover assessment, all these great assessments for free to educate people.
Do you feel that more people are into your social media because of your past life or because of what you've built now?
I think it's a combination. I think there's something about having street cred and professional cred that is a really unique combination. And then, of course, having a movie that grossed $500 million worldwide helps. But yeah, I think it's a combination.
And it's also interesting that you waited this long to write a book.
Yeah, I wish I could say that I had some grand scheme, but I didn't. And, when the movie came out, The Wolf of Wall Street, I was I think I was getting my doctorate 2 years later, but I was already a therapist. And when the movie came out, I had nothing to say. I'm not just going to speak for the sake of speaking. But then as I started to, like I said, work with women, and I had this movie that really was one of the most misogynistic movies on the planet, right? That shows the quintessential trauma bond. I got to exploit it for my own purposes. And so I talked when I actually had something to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating. I was always curious what happened to you and your character, because we see Jordan's character like in real life, and I read his books when I was in prison, which is ironic. And then
and he wrote it while he was in prison.
Yeah, and he kind of inspired like my writing style for the book I'm working on.
Oh, good.
And what he did kind of inspired me to do what I did. But I also made a lot of TikToks about him calling him a snitch that went viral. So I don't know if he'd be too fond of that. But
I think the one thing about my ex-husband is that clearly he's fine with showing himself, right? And he wrote the book, he made the movie, and he calls it a cautionary tale. So, when you put yourself out there, right, that's going to happen.
Yeah, and I was watching one of your clips recently where you said, like, this is, like, you're owning, like, why are you talking about the Wolf of Wall Street stuff now? And I thought that was great. Like, that related to me so much because we use those past, traumatic experiences to our advantage to help grow something bigger. That's
right. And, the past, while painful, as you know, it doesn't have to define us, but it can inspire us. And because here's the thing, the body and the brain only grow from threat. Nobody comes to therapy like, hey, Dr. Nay, I'm feeling great today. Can you help me? People come because they're on their knees, right? But that being on your knees and feeling like the world is falling apart is a great impetus to look inside and grow.
Absolutely. So where did you grow up? Where are you from?
I grew up in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, hence the Duchess of Bay Ridge. And I was very blessed. I grew up in Brooklyn in the 70s, which was an incredible time to live. No internet, kids played on the street. And my mother, I was raised by a single mother who was very into psychology. And so she was reading Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung in the 70s. And she was very psychological, hence why I became a therapist. My daughter's a therapist. And I could always talk about my feelings. There was no yelling in my home. I had a very peaceful home. And then I met Jordan.
Were you always into like that mindset?
Yes.
So that's something that's not portrayed really in the movie.
No. Oh, no. No, the movie doesn't go into the depth of my character, but that's okay, right? Because really, I was an ancillary object, I think, in the end, with my ex. And so that's how I'm portrayed in the movie. But no, I've always been a deeply spiritual, deeply psychological person from when I was really a little girl.
Mm-hmm. And the day you guys met that was portrayed in the movie?
That was correct.
That was real?
At the party. Yep. Yep. Somebody exposed themselves to me and I was like, we have to get the fuck out of here. These people are nuts.
When you look back on it now, do you wish that never happened? Like that meeting?
No, because I wouldn't have my children. And, listen, I'm 56 years old, right? And so I'm old enough to know that life has a course of its own. Like we can show up and do the footwork, as I like to say, but then there is a part of life I think that we have to surrender into that is our fate.
What did your mom think about that new lifestyle? Because that's not what you kind of...
Yeah, my mom was a very intelligent woman. And when I told her I was going to get married, she took me to lunch. And she said, my mother was English, and she said, my love, you don't have to do this. And I said, but Mom, I love him. And that's it. We got married.
I feel like the Duchess of Bay Ridge is such an iconic name, and
it
especially because years later you have like the Meghan Markle stuff and everything that was actually duchesses and all of that.
Yes. Yeah, really, I'm a Duchess doctor now, so that to me is a more important label for me, right? 10 years of schooling. I worked very hard to get that label. But yeah, it's funny. I take it all with a grain of salt. It was a long time ago. And, when the movie came out, I was in therapy ad nauseum about it because there was so many feelings to process, right? Going through something that really was very traumatic. And I moved to California and I was like, okay, that's behind me. And then there's the book and then there's the movie. And so there was a deep process of surrendering to okay, Nate, this is bigger than you. You just got to surrender and see what emerges. And I offer that to people because if you're facing something that really seems overwhelming, sometimes there is a beauty in letting go and letting life take its course. And that's what I did.
When you had walked away from the Wolf of Wall Street and that, did a part of you know that it was going to be a book or documented the way it did?
I could have never imagined that. No, I had no idea. No idea. And I walked away, like I say, with just my kids and my curtains. I walked away with zero money because I didn't want any of that money. It was all blood money, right? And so I had to really rebuild again at 31. 31, yeah.
How long were you guys actually together for?
7 to 8 years.
So it wasn't that long of a run.
No, but it was a deep one. As my father says, it's not the years, it's the miles.
Oh, and your dad was around during that time?
My dad was around too, yep.
What did he think?
Oh, my dad loved it. Okay. He loved it because he's kind of like a charming con man himself. And so he was all for it.
And what about your kids? What do they think about everything?
My kids are amazing, amazing children. And I was very blunt with them, because when I left Jordan, I had gone to a place called the Karen Foundation. And I went for a week to really learn about myself. And so when I felt very prepared to deal with them with this. And I just said, your dad was a drug addict and abusive, and that's why I left him. So I didn't go into your dad's bad, or I didn't disparage him. I was very factual. And Jordan moved to California after I moved to California to be with his children. So I had him over for every holiday. We were very close. And so when the movie came out, they were like, that's my dad.
Ah, so you guys formed a new type of relationship, a friendship after.
We did. We had, yes. We really came together and could co-parent. Because in a trauma bond, which is what I write about, there are two components. And the first component is a power imbalance. And he had the power, clearly, right? When he got arrested, the power imbalance shifted and we were equals. And so I think that really shifted our relationship, and we were able to become friends for our children.
Did you ever visit him in prison?
No, but my kids did.
Why did you never visit him?
Oh, I had no desire to do that. I was married and with my current husband, and my kids went with my uncle and my aunt, and they took them once or twice, I think. Yeah, he was there only for 22 months too.
Yeah, a short time.
Yeah, a short time.
He got less time than me, and he had a whole lot more money.
He did get less time than you. I'm sorry about that.
It's okay. Like we were saying out there, it was the best thing that could have happened to me.
Yeah.
Now, Margot Robbie plays you in the movie.
Correct.
Did you get to talk to her or meet with her?
I did. Yeah, I did.
Did she study you?
Yeah, she did. They wanted to get my accent, my Brooklyn accent, because, she has an Australian accent. And so I was actually taking my daughter to college. And so it was such a surreal moment. Dropped my daughter off at college and then went back to the hotel. I think I was at the Mercer Hotel, and she met me there with a speech coach. And so they taped me and interviewed me and for many hours, and then we took her to dinner.
Wow. And she wasn't as big as she is now.
No, this was her breakout movie. She was 22, so she was the age that I was when I met Jordan.
What did you think about that whole experience?
Again, it's so surreal and it was so weird, but she was lovely. And she said to me, when we took her to dinner, my husband and I, she said, I'm really afraid to be naked and I don't want to tell them. I don't want to tell Marty and Leo. And I said, well, that feeling right there that you have, speaking truth to power, that's how I felt my whole marriage, that I couldn't. So if you can embody that, I think you'll get how I felt.
Do you feel that your relationship with him set you up for what you do now, work-wise, helped you in a way?
Yeah, I think, again, I when I became a therapist, I never said, I want to just I want to be a trauma bond whisperer. I never thought that, this was the niche that I wanted to work in. I wanted to work with everybody. But again, based upon what was happening in the zeitgeist, we were hearing Jeffrey Epstein, Harvey Weinstein, the priests, the Boy Scout leaders, right? There was just so much abuse of power in the culture. And then I saw it in the microcosm in my room. And so I guess I just, what was happening in the culture with what I had experienced and then what was happening in my therapy room all combined just really inspired me to become a huge advocate for women. I mean, for people, because it happens to men too. So I don't want to leave men out of the picture, out of these toxic, abusive relationships.
Do you have male clients?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Is it very different from the female client, or are there similarities?
I think at the end of the day, human beings, as different as we are, is as similar as we are. I think we all want to be authentic and we all want to be in relation to each other. And we want it to be peaceful, but that just doesn't often happen. We have to learn how to do that.
What about families, like a mom and dad and a child? Is that type of bond, the trauma bond, a similarity there too?
It can happen. It can happen between lovers. It can happen between a boss and an employee. It can happen between parent and child. It can happen between friends, because really it's a toxic, dysfunctional relationship between two emotionally attached people. And usually one of the partners, is abusive, uses coercion, and often betrays the other person.
Yeah, I see it so much in the guests I interview. They have very, very traumatic childhoods.
Yes.
And that almost in every case, it does in every case that I've seen lead them on a path of addiction or prison.
Yeah, because, I wrote my dissertation on developmental trauma, and that is what, babies are born pretty perfect, and then just put them in front of a dysfunctional adult to fuck them up. But that's because their parents didn't know how to love and nurture and take care of them and attune to their emotions. And I always say, you need a license to drive a car, but you don't need a license to do the most important job in the world. And unfortunately, parents that don't know how to love, be good enough parents, because there's no such thing as a perfect parent, they pass on that trauma to their children until somebody comes along and breaks that intergenerational trauma cycle.
Were you worried that the trauma from, your first marriage with Jordan would rub off onto your kids?
Of course, yeah. That's one of the reasons I left him.
And how did you prevent that? Because they were already a little older. They
were 5 and 3. Mm-hmm. So I prevented it by being a good enough parent myself, even though it's the hardest job in the world. And then my current husband and I, we created a really I think, safe, albeit imperfect home for them. And then we've all just been in therapy forever.
Even now you're in therapy yourself?
I just stopped going to therapy. I was in therapy for 25 years. My daughter's a therapist. My children have been in therapy since they're 16. And we come from a family, due to my mother, where we talk about how we feel. And it's really that simple. Giving people the space to talk about how they feel and process how they feel without shaming, dismissing them, punishing them.
Why do you think men are so against therapy? Especially in prison, I see that. It's like almost you're made fun of for that.
Well, I think because, we haven't really taught men that it's okay to feel. We haven't taught men that it's okay to be vulnerable and it's okay to be human. We've forced upon them these gender roles that are really hard to meet, I think, sometimes. And so then they feel shame for being human.
Was it hard to put yourself back out there after leaving that first marriage?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, because I'm like, who am I going to trust? I can't trust anybody. Everybody's crazy. But then I learned actually it wasn't as much about trusting the other person. It was about trusting me and making a right choice. And life is messy, right? And I think if we come to radical acceptance around that, it makes it a lot easier to deal with. But yeah, it was hard to trust.
Were you even looking for that type of lifestyle that the Wolf of Wall Street gave you?
No, I don't even think I knew that sort of lifestyle existed.
Yeah, it seems very off from who you are as a person.
As you're getting to know me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Listen, I like nice things. Like, don't get me wrong. They're fun. But I didn't even know a world like that existed. Nobody in Brooklyn was driving Ferraris and had yachts and private planes. And no, I didn't even know a world like that existed. And it's not really what life is about.
So is it hard to go from that then to, I would say, maybe a normal marriage or relationship?
No, it wasn't hard. I was just so grateful to feel safe and peaceful, honestly, because it was so dramatic and erratic and traumatic, from the yacht sinking to the plane crashing to his drug addiction to, every day was like a different drama. And honestly, that's exhausting for your nervous system. So I was just so happy to be peaceful.
When that yacht just sunk recently, did you think about your experience during that?
I did. Mm. Yeah, I did. Actually, I think Jordan might have texted me when that happened. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it's freaky. Yeah,
that's what I thought of as soon as I read that article. I thought right back to...
Yeah, we could have. I definitely thought we were going to die that night, for sure. But we got, just like the movie shows, we got saved.
What would you say is like the biggest misconception of the movie?
The biggest misconception of the movie is that Jordan and I never fought about women. We always fought about his drug addiction. But it's interesting that he chose to write it like that.
Like the splashing of the water.
Yeah, I never did that.
You never did that?
I never did that. I probably should have.
You should have said that, though.
Yeah.
It makes you more of a badass in the movie.
No, I never threw. I did throw a Tropicana juice jar at his head, but I never did water in his face. But we really fought about his drug addiction because that was really hard for me to deal with as a young woman who had never experienced anything like that.
So why do you think he wanted to portray himself as a womanizer, wanting to get into fights with you about women and whatnot?
I don't really know. Maybe that protected him in some way, I don't know. Maybe he thought it was sexier, it was funnier, it was better, for the audience. I don't know. But yeah, no, we really fought about his drug addiction. Maybe that's a little darker, And
the feds and when they got involved, were you ever a target of their investigation?
They would threaten me and say, if you don't, well, what happened is the night that Jordan got arrested, they came, he was already arrested and I had actually gone out to get my son's blankie. He had left it at somebody's house. And when I came back, it's like all these FBI with the flashlights, in my driveway. I'm like, oh, fuck, what's happening? And so they're like, oh, your husband's been arrested on 11 counts of money laundering. Do you know what that is? I'm like, isn't that like what mobsters do? I didn't know. I'm like, don't they put money through a business or something? And so then what they did, which was really wrong that they did this to me, they took him away and they grilled me for 4 hours alone without a lawyer. But of course they did.
That's what they do.
That's what they do. But I wish somebody would have told me, you know. But anyway, they had a woman there to make me feel safe, and they grilled me and grilled me. And they would say, if you don't tell us this, but I knew I did nothing. You know, what were they going to arrest me for? Going to Barney's, New York too many times? You know, so, but it was scary. But I'm a badass. And I know what's his name? Coleman.
The FBI agent.
The FBI agent, he was there. And he had not interviewed, but pressured one of my friends. And so when he left, it was funny, he was really close in my face and he goes, so what'd your friends say about me? I go, they say you're a fucking dick.
That's funny.
That was pretty ballsy to say that to an FBI guy. But I'd had it. I was like, leave me alone. And then, and then that was it.
Did you know what Jordan was doing was illegal during your marriage to him?
I didn't know exactly what he was doing because he's like a genius. He's a financial mastermind. But I'm sure there was plenty of it that wasn't kosher. But it didn't matter what I thought. He wasn't going to listen to me.
Do you relate your experience to some of the women that do maybe date, like, say, people that are kind of in the criminal world, but the woman doesn't necessarily know that they're in the criminal world, but has suspicions of it?
Yeah.
But it is kind of attached to them emotionally or might have kids with them?
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, listen, when you're dealing with a very powerful person, right? There's nothing that a wife can do or say that's really going to make a difference. I mean, he didn't listen to me about his drug addiction. He wasn't going to listen to me about that. So that's his own way of being in the world.
Were you worried that your kids would get passed down any addiction issues?
Oh, sure. Yeah. But again, we're talking about it. We're addressing it. If it has ever come up for them, we're on top of it, right? In our family, clearly everything's an open book.
Very much so.
Right? Literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of open books, when you meet your current husband now, who's out here listening, when you meet him and you said you met him on a blind date, do you tell him on the first date who you are and what happened?
Totally.
That was the first date conversation?
Yeah. And he didn't care.
Wow. Did he know of Jordan before?
No, because you have to remember, like back then, before the book or the movie, people didn't really know. And he lived in California, right? And I was in New York. So I don't know if he really knew about him. But of course, I told him everything. That would be kind of bad to dump it on him 10 dates later. Oh, by the way, no, he knew and he was okay with it.
And was it hard for him when the book and the movie did come out?
I don't think so. I don't know. I think it'd be weird, like he'd be on the golf course and people be like, I saw your wife naked in the movie. He's like, that's not my wife. So I think that's funny. But I think, we've all made the best of it. And I think the moral of the story is that even though we went through some very traumatic, toxic, dysfunctional times, we've come out on the other side. And I think that's what gives people hope.
How long did it take you to decide you wanted to go back to school?
Oh, I didn't go back to school until I was 39.
Oh, that late.
Yeah.
So what year would that have been?
So that was 2007. So right when he wrote the book, I think. Yeah.
And he was already out of prison by that point.
Yes. He was just out of prison. Yes. Yeah.
So did you work like a regular job or anything during those years?
So what I did is I was a garment manufacturer with my husband. So when I was with Jordan, I had created a little maternity company and had a website and a store and a catalog. And so I had that business when I left him.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. And so I was doing that. And then I was meditating a lot in LA because that's what we do. And then I was like, I'm going to go back to school to be a therapist because I knew that therapy had saved me. Because the second I met Jordan, I put my ass into therapy at 23. I was like, this is way too much for me to manage. And I put myself in therapy. And I believe that therapy saved my life.
Wow, you were in therapy during the events of everything.
The whole time.
So why do you think that like a movie that's as powerful as that doesn't portray that at all? Because that could be a positive message.
Because I think it was his narrative, and I think it was his lens, and that's okay.
Did anyone ever approach you to share your narrative?
You mean like after the movie?
Or before or in general?
No, not really. No, it happened just much more after the movie. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
So how long did schooling take for you for what you have now?
Oh, God. So it was 2 years to get my master's, 5 years to get my doctorate. So 7 to 8 years.
7 to 8 years. Where did you go to school?
Pacifica Graduate Institute in Santa Barbara.
Okay. Is that a good school?
Amazing. It's made for adults. So you go for 3 days every month, and then you live on campus with your cohort, and then you come home and do all the work.
Oh, so you're living on campus with people that are in your age group.
Yeah.
Oh, so that must make it a lot more comfortable.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was a really very, very, very special experience, actually.
Now, what kind of lifestyles are those people coming from?
Just normal people that just, want to be therapists, that just, maybe they've been in therapy or maybe they've been through trauma. A lot of therapists have been through trauma. They just want to make a difference in the world.
What do you think was the biggest thing you learned about yourself during that time period of going back to school?
I'm the biggest nerd. I love school. My husband teases me. I love to write papers. I love to study. I love to learn. But again, I think that was really instilled in me from a young girl. Even when I was with Jordan, he makes fun of me in the book about it, how I went to school to cook. I went to school to be an interior designer. Like I went to school to learn about wine. I like to learn. I don't know. I'm just addicted to learning.
Oh, you went to culinary school too? Or?
I took classes for all these things. Because if I'm going to buy an expensive bottle of wine or a Louis XIV chair, I want to know what I'm doing. Because this was a whole new world for me.
Yeah.
I wasn't used to having $2,000 bottle of wine. I didn't know if it was a grape or a place. So I just like to learn. So going back to school, also, I think what it did for me is it immensely built my confidence because education is just so empowering.
Do you view money and those objects differently now after, experiencing it at such a young age and then losing it and then maybe gaining it back after? Do you look at it all differently?
Yeah, I just realize it's just stuff. It's just stuff at the end of the day, just stuff that we don't, it doesn't matter whether we have it or whether we don't have it. Now, do we need food and like heat and electricity and water and the essentials? And does money make life better to a certain degree? But I do see it, and I see this with my patients all the time. I think a certain amount of money, unless it's with a person who's highly emotionally intelligent, really causes a lot of harm, especially if you're dealing with an entitled, arrogant person.
Yeah, I don't think you need necessarily crazy amounts. Like I look at now, like if I think a few $100,000 a year is cool.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if you need millions.
Exactly.
Like what would I do with it?
Yeah, and I think that, like I said, in the hands of the wrong people, they really abuse that power and they exploit people, as we're seeing with P. Diddy. I mean, culture just shows us that it's really not always the best thing in the wrong hands.
Now, after you graduate, how long did it take you to start your own business, or do you go and work for someone else?
So you have to do 3,000 hours to get a license as a therapist. So that's why I always say to people that say they can't afford therapy, go find a person who's training, because I made $5 an hour for 3,000 hours. And so that takes about 5 years between the schooling and the licensure, but you're working, gaining those hours. Then you have to take 2 state tests, and then I had my practice.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that about finding someone that's in training.
Yeah, I always say that on every podcast I go on, because to offer people, like, look for the helpers. They're out there.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
I got to look at that.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about kind of like these online therapy sites and virtual that COVID kind of created?
If I got my PhD in somatic psychotherapy, which means it's about like when a body meets a body. There's nothing like being in person. And if you would have told me that I would have been doing virtual therapy, I would have said, get out of here. But now I do it all day long.
Was that only because of COVID?
Only because of COVID. I used to have an office where everybody came.
Okay.
But now, just because of COVID, I do it all the time, and I work with women all over the world.
Yeah, there is something about that in-person body connection, though. That's why I only do like the in-person.
Yeah, no, there really is. There really is. But, there is a convenience of being able to do it through Zoom, and I can reach a lot more people that way. I mean, that is the beauty of the internet.
Have you met like interesting celebrities or famous people through therapy?
Yes. I've worked, that's what I say, whether you're a celebrity or a judge or a lawyer or a teacher or a housewife, it doesn't matter. Anybody and everybody can fall prey to a trauma bond.
Is that like a common denominator you see across all of these types of people?
What do you mean?
Like that even people that are high and
Yes.
powerful are still humans and people
Everybody.
too.
Yeah. We're all just human suffering beings.
What were some of the struggles of starting your own practice in those early days?
Really just doing the hours, you know, the amount of hours. There wasn't really a lot of struggle for me because I'd been in therapy so long, and I think I'm just really good at my job. This is what I was meant to do. Mm-hmm. I just found it a little later. So for any of you late bloomers, don't give up, you know. There wasn't really that much of a struggle. I mean, just doing the actual work is a grind. I mean, doing the work and studying for all the tests. I mean, that's not easy. But again, when you face those challenges and those obstacles, and then you come out the other side, that's the only way to build real self-esteem.
Yeah. What did, on the topic of what you just said about late bloomers, a lot of people that come on the show are people that are getting out of prison in their 30s or 40s or 50s.
Yeah.
What advice do you give to them about, you know, starting over and rebuilding? And a lot of these individuals have no relationship with their kids too. Yeah,
that anything is possible. Human beings, we are beyond resilient, and that no matter what you've experienced, no matter how much trauma you've experienced, I think there's an innate capacity in each of us to reach for healing and to reach our potential. But you can't do it alone. Resilience cannot be built alone, and that's why therapy works. So reach out for the helpers. Look for people that can support you. Find a community that will be part of this process of you coming home to yourself. And I know it can happen.
How long do clients typically stay with you for?
Oh, God, I've had some for 9 years, some for a month.
Wow. I guess that helps with the virtual aspect, that you could keep them as people's lives change and they move and whatnot.
Yeah. Or sometimes, you know, they'll come to me for the first 2 years once a week, and then they'll come once a month, or maybe they're in a crisis and they need 3 times that week. The way I work is I have a scheduling link, and I just say, here's my scheduling link. Once they've taken their assessments and become part of my practice, you make an appointment when you want.
Now, do you do general therapy too, like just like whatever the classification that is?
Yeah, I can do anything. You know, I was trained, but right now I would say I mostly work with women trying to escape these dysfunctional relationships or heal from these dysfunctional relationships.
How often do you see yourself bringing your past experiences that were in the public eye into, you know, your conversations with individuals?
You know, it depends on only if it's appropriate. Right? Only if it's appropriate to the situation. And, you know, because that's what's changed about therapy, right? The old rules of therapy was that the therapist was a blank screen and never really shared their story. But I mean, I have no choice. Everybody knows mine. But if it's appropriate and it resonates and it makes them feel validated and less shameful, because there's a lot of shame when you're in a toxic relationship, then I will bring it up to them.
It definitely gives you a ton of street cred.
It really does.
So now tell us about social media, how you got into that world and what that was like to build your platforms.
Yeah, that was, you know, I got on Instagram a long time ago, like 2013.
Okay, in the early days of Instagram.
In the early days of Instagram. And I remember my husband be like, why are you always on Instagram? I was like, I don't know, I guess it worked out. So I just, you know what? I just started to build it, and we posted every single day. And, you know, that's the thing about life, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's in a career, whether it's how you love your partner, how you love your children, consistency is king.
Yeah, I post every day since the last 2 years when I started.
Yeah, and so then I built my Instagram, and then about 2 to 3 years ago, one of my young patients says, you have to go on TikTok. I'm like, I am not going on TikTok. I'm 54. I don't want to film myself every day. I'm an introvert. So it really took me a very long time to be comfortable with all these damn videos I do. And I did it. And then I started to talk about the movie, and it just went viral.
Well, because people want to hear, I feel like for so long, I was a senior in high school in 2013 when it came out.
Yeah.
So in my mind, you were one of the icons of the story. I think it was more you because of who played you,
right.
than Jordan. But it was just, I don't know, it was interesting, but no one ever heard from you.
Yes. And so then it went viral. And I was like, oh, okay. She was right. She was right. She gets free therapy forever. And shout out to Alex. And so then and now I love it because I love my community. Mm-hmm. And we have such a beautiful, special bond. And I answer all my direct messages myself while I still can. And I don't know, it's just become a very beautiful space to help people heal.
That goes a long way, answering messages. I try to answer all of my messages and be responsive because your next best patient or story or podcast guest could be in there.
Yeah, and I learn a lot from them. They're in the thick of it. They're on ground zero dealing with this. And sometimes just a little, like, you can do this goes a long way.
Do you find social media negatively affecting some of your clients from
Not
a
mine.
mental health?
Not mine.
Okay. Even if they're seeing other relationships or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, not mine because my audience is very hungry for information about narcissism and trauma bonds because it's so painful to be in a trauma bond that they want any information that can help them.
Mm. It'd be an interesting conversation to have you sit down with like one of those like fraud guys, like a Jordan, like doing that type of interview and dissecting, their brain and stuff. Because a lot of those guys do share those narcissistic traits and stuff.
There's a lot of them in the world, as we've seen.
Yeah. You should start a podcast.
I'm too busy right now.
But you'd think it's unlimited content, clips, everything like that.
I know. Yeah, not right this second, but I guess maybe also because I'm talking to people all day long.
Yeah. What's like a typical day like for you now?
So I wake up. I usually try to work out if I can. I like to lift weights. I'm a big weightlifter since I'm 18. I love to lift weights. And then I just start my day, just on my Zooms. I usually do maybe 2 podcasts a week. And I'm just working on Zoom with them, and that's it.
Do you ever feel yourself getting tired of sharing your story?
No, I don't. Not yet.
Well, I guess you've started kind of recently, too.
Yeah, no, not yet. Because you know what I think is like, if my story can help one person think that, okay, there's hope. I can get out of this trauma. I can heal from trauma. I can get to the other side. Then it's a good day. At the end of the day, what are we all here for? And there's a really important term that's used in Jungian psychology called generativity. And it's like, you get older and what legacy are you leaving? Do you want to make the world a better place? And I do.
What do you think was a major mind shift for you to start posting about your past life?
What happened was, okay, so there was this one post where Cinderella, the scene when Margot Robbie's going like this?
Yeah.
And so somebody did a thing where they put Cinderella in that position of Margot Robbie and did, I think, Leo as the prince or something. Or I forgot. Yeah, Cinderella was. And I said, what did I say? I said, your prince can turn into wolf, but it's okay. You can become a doctor. I just did that one post as a goof. And again, it went crazy. So what happens is I just read the audience. The more I posted about it, the more engaged they were. So that just led me to believe, like, okay, they want more of this. I really didn't know that they did, which I know sounds silly, but I'm so clinical and I get so academic. That's why even with my book, when my publisher told me the title, I was like, that's not academic enough. They were like, Nadine, it's the right title. So it was hard for me, I think, to move away from that clinical piece of it. And sometimes it's still hard, but it works.
Did the publisher want to, bring up your old identity at all for a title or anything in the branding?
No, because we really didn't. We really wanted it to be not a memoir. I wanted it to be a book to help people.
And how is it structured? Like in different chapters?
Yeah.
Or?
So what happens is in the beginning, so the first 3 chapters are, I talk about what a trauma bond is, and I talk about the pathological partner, and I talk about the woman usually, or the victim in the trauma bond. And then the middle is about the scars you get, how to escape, why women leave or why people leave, and how to leave safely. Because actually the most dangerous time is when a person wants to leave. And then the third section is all about how to heal.
So why do you think that people struggle to leave in these types of relationships?
Oh boy, that's a big question. But the reason why they struggle to leave is because when you're in a trauma bond with this pathological person, they wear 2 masks. And I call the 2 masks Romeo and Dirty John. So 30% of the time they're like Romeo. They're loving, they're generous, they're kind, they're helpful. 70% of the time they're cruel, controlling, sadistic, mean. But it's called intermittent reinforcement when there's like 2 different behaviors that they're always showing you, right? It keeps you very confused. And so you don't know, is he good or is he bad? Am I crazy? Is he crazy? Is a relationship good or bad? So you're constantly confused and you're always hopeful that that 30% part is the real part. But it's not. So it's just very hard to leave because you've become emotionally attached. What it is they seduce you and they get you attached to them, but then they switch. And so then you're attached to them and then you're bonded to them. And it's that intermittent reinforcement that actually bonds you to them.
So what are the warning signs to look for?
When you're like, wait, I don't want to be in that. How do I not get there?
No, but like, is there actual warning signs?
There's actual warning signs. Okay. So we call them red flags, right? And so if you meet somebody and they tell you all their exes are crazy, why are they all crazy, right? Or if they're constantly the victim, or if you notice they blame people all the time, if they have a substance use problem, right? That's a huge red flag. If they're obsessed with you and jealous and possessive in like the first 4 weeks, or if they tell you they love you, you're their soulmate in 2 weeks, run like hell. It's a problem. So I have a whole pathological lover checklist in my book and on my website.
Now, some of these are hideable, I feel like, in those
very
first few
hideable.
dates. Like you wouldn't know a lot of, love bombing, yes, you would see that. And attachment and craziness. But other stuff, like I've known people that have been on the show where their spouse didn't know they had a drug issue for a while.
Yeah, sure. Because when you're a manipulative person and you're intentionally manipulating someone, but the other person doesn't know you're intentionally manipulating them, then how would you know? You just think, oh, this is who this person is, but they're showing you their best side, which we all do to a point, right? I think I'm showing you my best side today. You're showing me, right? You're not going to see me at my worst, but it's different when the intention behind the behavior is for manipulation.
Now, do you think someone can get to know someone through social media, like watching someone on a podcast or watching clips of them, to understand who they are as a person and their character? Is that possible?
Probably, yeah.
I ask that because I'll have people that reach out to me that, in a way, they kind of know me because they see they'll listen to the show and they know more about me than I could ever have learned of them in that time period too.
Sure, yeah, definitely.
It's interesting. I'm very fascinated with that
parasocial relationship.
Just with everything. Just like relationships, like why people stay in relationships, why people get into those relationships. And I see that just really as common themes throughout the show.
Yeah. And it's, listen, we're social beings. We're built for connection. We want to love. We want to be loved. And so I think it's very hard when you go into a relationship just wanting love and connection, but then the whole thing blows up in your face. It's very painful.
So what do you think then is a fair amount of time to develop love for someone?
Oh, I would say definitely a few months, like 6 months, because you have to really get to know somebody and see how they behave. And listen, you can feel lust for someone and your hormones can be, driving you towards that, but that's different than love, which is like warmth, empathy, quality of connection, giving someone the space to be who they are.
All right, so I have a question, and I'm only going to ask you this because I've been watching it, and people are going to rip me for it, but Love is Blind, do you think that's real?
Oh, the show?
Yeah, like can someone actually develop love for someone, blindly marry them, and feel that quickly?
Oh, I haven't. I think I've watched the show a little bit.
So essentially, they don't even meet each other.
So how do they fall in love?
Well, they say "I love you" and propose to them behind a wall, and it's over a few dates, really.
So they're behind walls.
Yeah, and you're like speed dating essentially.
And you're just talking to each other through a wall, and you fall in love.
Yeah, and then you propose to them, and then you meet them after, and you
do
say,
any
"I
of
love
these
you."
relationships last?
Some get married, some don't. Like in the newest season, 2 of like the 8 couples end up getting married.
Wow, I'd be curious to see what happens to these relationships.
You should make content about that too.
Yeah, I don't know that I believe that could be possible.
Yeah,
but I bet you it makes for good entertainment.
Oh, it really does. I think it's so corny and silly that's why it's like entertainment. It's really interesting.
I watch little pieces of it. I don't know that is what I would define as love.
Do you watch reality TV shows?
I love reality TV.
What's the favorite?
Oh, I love The Real Housewives. I watch all of them. It's my guilty pleasure.
Oh, what's the best one that you like?
Well, right now I'm loving Salt Lake.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say I have mixed opinions about it because I'm going to be a hypocrite right now. I love it because it's my guilty pleasure, but I also get upset that the women are my age and act the way they do. But that's life, isn't it? Everything's a paradox. But yeah, no, I do love it.
A few of them have been going to prison.
That's the crazy part.
I was with Teresa's husband at Fort Dix in New Jersey.
Oh, you were?
Yeah, I was with him.
Would you see Joe?
I saw it. I was in the lunch line with him one day. I was on his side because it's split into 2 yards.
Wow.
So I'm split. I was trying to get her on the show, but she doesn't really like to talk about prison.
I'm sure she doesn't. That's probably a really painful thing for her.
Yeah, a lot of the celebrities that like kind of like you encounter, they don't necessarily talk about prison. They go to prison, but they don't talk about it. It's not really the norm to talk about it on like podcasts.
Because they feel so much shame, you think?
I don't know. What do you think it is?
I would think that. Yeah. I mean, I've never been in prison, so I have so much empathy for you, the fact that you endured that. And I don't think prison is like, I wish it was more reformative, but I would think that there would be a lot of shame around that.
I even look
So it's very brave of you to do what you do.
Thank you. Well, it took me a while. I worked at Whole Foods for 4 years when I got out.
Yeah.
And worked my way up. And then my friend convinced me, like what happened to you, to go on TikTok.
Okay.
And my 5th video about being in solitary for 6 months went viral. Like 1.5 million views overnight.
So there you knew. Then you knew you had something.
And I doubled down on it. And now I post 5 episodes a week of this podcast and just get to interview people.
And do you find that now that you've kind of exposed yourself and you're like almost have like radical acceptance around what happened to you, do you feel yourself freer around the whole experience?
Yeah, I think for so many years I was so embarrassed by
That's
prison.
What I mean. Yeah, shame. Yeah.
That's what society, I think, puts upon you.
Of course.
It's a huge shame factor.
Yeah.
And so I would never talk about it. Family would ask, friends. But now I talk about it for a living. Like I'm building a prison cell upstairs.
Yeah,
people
so it
are
freed
like,
you.
Yeah, they're like, don't you get PTSD from that?
No, but see, so that brings us almost full circle to our conversation, right? Is that talking about it, processing it, owning it, having radical acceptance around the things that happen to us, free us.
Yeah. It really is fascinating. And another thing you said that stuck out to me was that you said you're introverted.
Yes.
But you talk to people like publicly or privately or like you're socializing with them. And I feel like I relate to that because I feel like I'm introverted, but yet I do this type of dynamic. Yeah.
Well, an introversion really just means that an extroversion really just means how you recharge. So I recharge by writing, by being solitary, by being reflective, meditating, contemplate. Like that's how I recharge. That doesn't mean I can't be social and do these things, but it's really more about how you recharge. Like my husband's an extrovert. He recharges by going to the supermarket and talking to every single person in the supermarket. Not me. I look down. I don't talk to anybody.
I can't do that.
Right. So you're just naturally more introverted. Yeah. But that doesn't mean we can't do these things. It's just that's not how you recharge.
So that's probably a good balance in an introvert and an extrovert to some extent, though.
It is. It's a very good balance. Yes.
Wow, incredible. So now, what advice would you give to the audience? You know, anyone that's going through a struggling time, struggling to leave a relationship, or just anything in general, rebuilding?
Well, I think, you know, what we just kind of touched on, that whatever you're facing right now in life, it's not forever. Look at the part that you play in it, right? Because we have to take accountability for the mistakes that we've made, which I've made plenty. And that's okay. That just means you're human. There's no reason to feel shame about it, because shame, I think, the word shame, the root word is skim, which means to hide. So we want to hide, right? Don't hide. Reach out to the helpers. They're everywhere. Like Mr. Rogers. You're too young for Mr. Rogers.
No, I watched.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, of course.
So he says, look for the helpers. Look for the helpers. Don't push past the shame. Reach out for help. Reach out to an intern. Go to a church counselor. Go to somebody. Go to AA. Go for help, and just start to process what's happened to you. And day by day, little by little, you will rebuild your life. It is possible.
Well, Dr. Nay, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Yeah, I never thought our paths would collide.
I know. But you know what? As different as we are, as similar as we are. Isn't that funny?
Yeah, well, I'm glad we made this connection. And if you ever need anything at all with content or anything, I'm sure your husband's got more questions. So
I'm sure he does.
I'm happy to help you guys with that.
Okay, he says he does. All right.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.